All right. Hello, viewers. Today we'll be talking about something that affects the professional lives of quite a lot of people in our generation, but maybe we don't always spend too much time discussing it, like openly with other people who might be in similar situations. So the topic is moving for today. So we'll be talking about how moving has almost become an integral part of professional life in this post-globalist world. Wait a second, is post-globalist still globalist? But in this globalist world, and how having like an abundance of opportunities from all parts of the world isn't always a positive in terms of, and we'll talk about how having an abundance of possibilities from all parts of the world isn't always a positive. And we'll also talk about cases where it is very much a positive. And we'll also be discussing the various psychological and mental sides or mental aspects of moving. So I have two guests with me today. So my first guest is Borys Kuca, who is a mathematician like myself, and he is currently based at the University of Crete in Greece. And before Crete, he has worked in the US, in the UK, in Finland, and he's originally from Poland. So he has moved around quite a bit. And my other guest is Ayla Schröder. She is a bioinformatician working at a company called Scouts, and she divides her time between Koblenz and Munich. But I mean, she has spent quite a lot of time dealing with these questions regarding moving herself. So, okay, welcome to you both. So let me start with Ayla because, I mean, this is Boris's second time. This is Ayla's first time on this podcast. So, Ayla, so you have not moved outside of Germany yet for
Yes.
work, but I'm sure there have been situations where there were opportunities like that, and you had to say no to those opportunities for various reasons. So when you think of the topic of moving, does it seem to you like does it immediately seem to you to be something that is like negative, like that is of less use than that is of what's the word that is less beneficial and more I don't know, more a source of problems or obstacles?
I wouldn't say so in general. I think moving always requires that everything fits together. So your private part and like where you're moving to or planning to move towards. And I think when everything fits together, it's all fine. But finding this combination that everything works fine together, that's the obstacle, so to say.
Yeah.
That also was one thing that kept me in the past from going abroad, because of my private life parts didn't fit so well together with that.
Right. We will be talking about how the like the generic life aspect or the generic family aspect is almost always a significant factor. So Boris, I mean, clearly you have moved. Like, boy, have you moved. So when you think of moving, I mean, does it seem to you to be a positive thing? Let me just add something extra just for your case. So when I know, for example, like when you decided to go to Finland, did you go to Jyväskylä? Like when you went to Finland for your postdoc and then when you went to Greece, the reason you chose those universities was solely because those universities had people who worked in your area. Like that was the
More or
only
less.
reason, right?
So
like you weren't going to Finland for the sake of going to Finland. You weren't going to Greece for Greek weather or Greek food. So when you think of moving, like what are the first points that come to your mind?
yeah, well, my first association with moving is hassle, because moving is a very big logistical hassle. And it's also quite a nightmare in more than one way, because of course you have to move all your things together from one place to another. There are usually quite a few formalities that you have to arrange. For instance, getting an accommodation in a place that you haven't been to before is usually quite a challenge. And it's also a fairly stressful thing. But also in each new country, you usually have to register, you have to arrange health insurance, you have to fill in some further paperwork that these countries require. And some countries like Greece, for instance, require quite a lot of paperwork before they allow you to start work there.
You're speaking to two people living in Germany, so that's not That's not
Yeah, I'm
news.
sure Germany is doing much better in this regard, despite all the complaints that you might have. But yeah, I would say my first association with moving is not very positive, and this might come as a surprise given all the moves that I have done in my life. But I've never really been a fan of moving that much, and I look forward to being able to finally live in one place, which I hope will happen soon. But somehow, yeah, the professional opportunities caused me to move all over these places, and this is the primary reason why I did this, because first I went to the US for undergraduate, and to be honest, I didn't have much idea of what I'm doing when I did this, but well, I did this. I went there and I had to stay there for 4 years to finish my degree. Then once I was in the US, I knew I wanted to do PhD, but I also knew I don't want to stay in the US. So for that reason, I wanted to go back somewhere to Europe, and the UK was one of the few countries that allowed me to do PhD without getting a master's degree beforehand. And then I chose both my postdocs while I was still doing PhD in the UK. So even though Greece came as the second postdoc, this was my original plan, and the decision was based only on the fact that there was a person in Crete that I wanted to work with. But I knew that because of paperwork, I have to take a few months beforehand. It will take a few months before I'm able to start the job. So Finland was an opportunity that I found almost instantly as a place for a short postdoc in between. So that's why I went there. But yeah, so that's roughly how my path looked like.
Yeah, and also like Ayla, when you think of moving and you think of the hassles that come with it, do you ever think that the positives could maybe outweigh the hassles? Like in the sense that, for example, if you are from Spain or Italy, and you are looking at going away from your country of birth, going away from your home country to, I don't know, a place like the UK or Germany to work, because as you know very well, I'm sure that in many jobs, the average salary is better in Germany than it is in Italy or Greece or many countries east of those countries east of Italy and Greece. So do you think there are cases where the positives, mainly to do with money or opportunities, but let's focus on money for this question, outweigh the potential negatives?
Of course, yeah. And we actually have, I think, 4 colleagues in our company that actually moved to Germany and are now working with us because, yeah, for them it was a very great opportunity to come here.
Yeah, but like I'm asking, like for yourself, like do you ever consider these factors and think that okay, those are outweighing the other like negative factors?
Yeah, especially in an academic context, I definitely thought about it, and in the end, it never outweighed it for myself. But I thought about it a long time, so it's not that I could easily say, okay, it doesn't outweigh it.
Right. And then Boris, like, do you ever see? But you of course already answered this question, because as you said, like when you went to Greece, your sole objective was to work with someone particular at this university. But like, how do you think money factors into the equation?
Yeah, it's actually a difficult question. I think we all prefer to make more money than less money.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, I don't think this should be the main reason to choose a particular place. So for instance, money-wise, my salary in Greece is lower than it was in Finland, of course, but it's even lower than my PhD stipend in the UK. So salary-wise, this would definitely not be, the best decision to make. But as I said, my motivation was very different. In Finland, the salary was amazing compared to everything that I've made before. And while this was not the main factor for me going there, this was definitely one thing that, let's say, convinced me that this is not such a horrible option as it seemed at the beginning. And it wasn't a horrible option. Spoiler alert, it was a great place to be. But yeah, so I think financial considerations always play a role somewhere there. But if I were to advise someone, I would say that don't take it as your first factor.
Yeah, of course, like because if one were to think only in terms of financial factors, then all postdocs would want to go to the UAE or I don't know, Shanghai Like, because there are
Yeah.
places, there are universities in those places where the salary is really quite decent, but of course you will be inconvenienced in so many other ways that it is almost never worth it.
Yeah, but also I would maybe add to it that if you, especially if you work in a different country that you've lived in before, then there are all these other expenses that you have to take, right? For instance, moving can take quite some money if you have a lot of things that you have to ship. And if you plan to visit your homeland, then of course flight tickets and everything will also take some money. So there are also extra costs of working abroad that one might not think of immediately when making this decision.
Ayla, in general, does culture play a big part? Like, if you are thinking about moving to, I don't know, France, and would it ever be a factor for you, or would it ever matter to you that the language will be different? You will have a harder time integrating yourself into the like society or the community around you. Like, would these ever be factors, or would you just not pay attention to those issues?
I think this depends on the actual country. So I think in general, it's always interesting to learn something new, to get to new cultures. So I think it's more of a chance than of an obstacle or something that would keep me back. I'm not sure if I could go to any or every country on the world, but I think there are so many countries that would be interesting for me to go there and to live there. That is really not a problem.
Right, okay. And so you never think that like you would be missing the, let's say, the kind of amenities that you enjoy in your current life if you moved away to a faraway country. Like, for example, I don't know, I don't want to say food, but okay, let's say food, or I mean things of that nature. If you get my point. Like, often I hear people from India, where I'm from, complain about the lack of good Indian restaurants in the US
You
or
guys are
wherever.
pretty hard to satisfy, to be honest.
Yeah, or wherever, but they won't go back. It's not like, oh, the food is shit, I'm gonna take the next flight back. No, they are gonna complain, and they're still gonna stay. uh, so like, clearly, like, of course, maybe there is an element of a performance there. Like, they will say it to everyone to sort of put on a bit of a performance, and it will be funny in that way. But I'm guessing, like, for many of us, for many people, like, irrespective of their nationality, it is important maybe to be in a place where the food that you get to eat every day is not too horrible. Like, for example,
Yeah.
I don't know much about, let's say, South Korean food. I have no idea.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah. So, but if I moved there, I'll maybe still pin my hopes on, like, finding places selling standard international stuff, like, like pasta or whatever. But, like, do you get my point? Like, does this ever um like bother you? Like, bother either of you?
But couldn't you just also cook yourself? If you're so craving for, like, say, Indian food, or in my case, like
Yeah.
a traditional German food, I could just cook it by myself.
I don't think
But-
he can find all the spices that he would want in a
But you can
German
order them
supermarket.
online.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. No, I mean, it's not a problem with me at all. I'm just saying, like, it could be a problem, or it could be a thing with many others. Okay, let's
Well,
move to.
I had this problem, actually. Let me add that when I was in the States, I was living in the dorms for 4 years, and we didn't really have a space to cook there, so everyone was eating in the dining halls by default, and the food was shit. I
Of
hope
course.
you don't mind a fair bit of offensive language in your podcast,
course, yeah.
but I think this is the most accurate description that I can give. And this was one of the many things that I hated about this place, and one of the many ways in which I felt like I don't fit in the culture. So for me, for instance, in the US, food was a big problem, but then once I moved back to Europe, it didn't really matter that much which country I live in, because I could cook for myself, and I could find the things that I want to eat.
Yeah. But I mean, were you trying to cook traditional Polish food in the US?
No, because as I say, we didn't really have much space to cook, so we
Mm-hmm.
had to eat in the dining halls.
Yeah, Yeah, also talk about the psychological side to moving. So the way I think of moving often involves psychology in a very significant way. So, for example, um, I will probably be moving to the UK or to America in August. I haven't decided where to go completely yet. So when I'm thinking about moving now, I'm thinking, okay, so I was in Germany for, I don't know, 16 months and a bit. What have I done during my time here? Like if 10 years from now, I think back to the time when I was in Germany in 2022 and 2023, will I have some concrete memory to fall back on? Will I have, let's say, something to remember my time by? So this for me is much, very much a factor. Like in research, like often you have the papers that you wrote when you were in that, when you were at that position, or the things that you started working on. But like sometimes I feel like the city that I'm leaving to move to another city takes something from me. Like I don't want to sound too for poetic, but like it takes something from me that is uh, that cannot be taken back in a way. Like if like when I left Manchester and moved to Germany, I was feeling exactly that the city is taking something from me that I can't ever uh, like take back, and that is very it sounds, as I said, sentimental and fake to a large extent. But like for example, when I was leaving Manchester, I was thinking of all the places where I was when I thought of certain things. Like as I was on my way to the airport, I was like, oh my god, I was here when I did that. It wasn't so much with people. I wasn't thinking of friends, or like I wasn't thinking of people as much. I was like literally non-living objects. Like this tree, I was walking by this tree when I suddenly had that idea to do that thing. And yeah, but is this relatable to either of you, the
Yes,
psychological side?
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. It's very interesting too. From what I've noticed from many of my friends, and a lot of them have moved between cities or between countries, people tend to react very differently to these things. So some people tend to be predominantly excited about changing a place, going to a new place. Others, like me, are usually anxious and worried. And sometimes people have both these emotions to
Mm-hmm.
different extents. For me, I think the city, like I agree with the sentiment that you express, namely that if I spend even a few months or even a few
Yeah.
weeks in a certain city, I feel attached to it one way or another. And I do feel like I'm leaving something behind. And it's even if I don't like the place, it
Yeah.
still hurts to leave it because this means, putting all the memories behind. But to me, I think the hardest part psychologically is that every time you move, you basically have to recreate your social life from scratch because you leave your friends
Yeah.
behind. They usually don't move with you. And you come to a new place, you have to
If you
find new
if you
friends.
if you
And
have a
sometimes
social
it's
life, that is.
easy, sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's maybe not easy, but sometimes you can accomplish this in a finite amount of time, but sometimes it's very difficult. So for me, for instance, in Manchester, I found friends eventually, but it took me some time. In Finland, I found a group of friends very quickly, and this was a very nice thing. Of all the places that I've lived in, definitely the Finnish experience was the best. Whereas in Greece, it has been quite difficult so far. Um, so yes, it is. There are definitely various psychological issues that show up when you move, and
Mhm.
some of them you can resolve, you have control over, but in many cases there is a limited amount of things that you can do. Like you can look for friends, but whether you'll find friends or not
Yeah.
is a different question.
Yeah. And I like the same question, but let me just add something extra for you. So, of course, you haven't changed countries as much, but even within a city, when you change houses, I feel like I have had this feeling before. Like I'm leaving this community to go to that community, this street to go to that street. I feel like that street, as that street is going away from my current life, it is taking with it like a bunch of memories that will just by default be associated in my life with that street. So yeah, so I mean, like, how do you feel about the psychological side?
Yeah, so we actually moved a lot within Germany, I think 7 or 8 times by now.
Okay, okay.
So because my husband has to move from place to place every roughly 2 years. So yeah, we move a lot. I think I feel on the one side similar to what you described, so that leaving something behind in this farewell moment, but also I somehow see that every stop that I have also gives me something, like a new experience, also meeting new people. So we have so many cities in Germany where we have friends and that we can visit, and maybe it's also easy to go back and also reactivate those memories that, okay, I had this moment here, and then being able to go back and relive this memory. So it doesn't feel like it's taken from me, more like an addition to what, like an addition, like a present.
Right.
More positive view on it. But of course, it's also always difficult to have this farewell and to say, okay, now this period is over and it won't be that intense anymore with that group of people, with that like neighborhood or something. Yeah. So it's a mix.
Yeah. And also, like, since you mentioned like the changing nature of jobs of your husband, like on the family, not the changing nature, what do I mean? Like the changing physical location of like his job. As you mentioned, like on the family side, I feel like people who are married or who have children, or people who have like other kinds of commitments. It could be commitments to people or commitments to other things. Could be even like, say, I don't know, you volunteer at the local I don't know, town hall, and it's just like a community thing. Like every Wednesday you go there, you take part in some nice activity, and maybe you don't even know the names of people you are seeing every week or every other week. But when you're leaving that city, you could think like, okay, I will maybe never see those faces again, and that can be what's the word? I mean, that will definitely have a psychological side, like that kind of realization. Um, so, like on family and people in general, like Boris, how do you approach this side? Like, do you always, as well, you said like you have to often recreate your social life anew when you move or after you've moved. Uh, but like, do you keep like a core group of friends that you always will have good relations with,
I
no
think
matter where you are
from my
physically?
experience so far, the best determinant of who you stay in touch with is whether they are active on social media or not. Because it's a very simple thing, actually. I have a lot of friends in various places that I lived in, but because they're not really good at responding, the contact very quickly fades out after moving. Whereas I tend to stay in touch more with those people who are good at responding, regardless of whether we were very close at the time of
Yeah.
living in the same place or not. So yeah, of course, in each place you have, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 people maybe that you hang out with on a daily basis, and you tend to stay in touch with 1, 2, 3, not many really.
Yeah.
So
No, but
so even if you stay in touch, it's always with a limited number of people, I would say.
right. No, I was talking about like family members in particular. Like, have your family lived in Poland all this time, or have they moved as well?
My family has lived in Poland. I mean, my family. Well, when I say my family, I mean my parents.
Yeah.
They have lived in Poland all this time, so the basic point of reference, which is my family home, has stayed there all the time.
Okay.
My brother has moved since then because he started his university degree in Germany. But somehow still my basic point of reference is the family home in which I am at the moment.
Right.
So this, to me, this helped definitely. I can't really imagine doing all these moves around if I didn't have a stable, safe haven that I can always go back to.
Yeah, and also Ayla, like as you mentioned, like when you're moving with a family, like say when you're moving with your husband, does it feel less like a move and more like just something small you have to do? Because if you're moving with your family, can't one argue that moving like that is basically like transporting the family unit from one physical location to just another physical location? Like, of course, like social life and the factors related to it, can still be important or significant. But do you think it's different in a very major way, like moving with family as opposed to moving as a nuclear single self?
I think it makes it definitely easier when you're not moving alone.
Yeah.
Because you have at least one other person that you still have a very close relationship to, and that you don't have to start from zero. But I think that's only one part of your life, because all the other social parts surrounding you, and maybe you change a job, or your new neighborhood, you try to find new connections in the new city. I think this makes up quite an important aspect. So
Right.
So it's easier, but it's not just like nothing.
No, it's not
So
nothing
moving is
because
still difficult.
no, but like, have there been instances where there were like technical things that were like making things a little difficult to handle, like technical, like I don't know, with deregistration and re-registration, like I don't know, like some paperwork or something like that?
I think just the standard German bureaucracy.
Yeah, of
I
course,
think
bureaucracy.
just the normal
the canonical German troubles.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with me, when I'm changing countries, it is almost always like the paperwork, or if I have to get a work permit or a visa. I know things will get sorted out eventually, but there's always the looming anxiety that, oh, I have to get this done, then that done. And during that process, like when that thing is going on, I can't enjoy my last few days at the last city. And it's always like, yeah, and okay. So like Borys, like when you on this topic again, like with when it comes to moving with family, and when you said earlier, like you might soon have a permanent, like you didn't say you might soon have a permanent job, but let's say we interpret it as you saying you might soon have a permanent job, or like you might soon have a permanent what's the word, base. Um, how is family important to you when you calculate that, when you approach that question? Like, would you always want to be somewhere close to where your family live, or would you be fine with having a permanent job in, I don't know, Australia?
No,
With the
at
US?
least from the last few years, I'm fairly certain that I at least want to try to move back to the part of Poland that I come from, and to seek a permanent base, as you nicely called it there.
Yeah.
Family is one reason. I think, well, actually, for me, it's not just my nuclear family, but I have also cousins which I'm quite close to and who also live in this area. So
Right.
I have quite a lot of people in this area that I am close to and that I could potentially count on in the time of troubles.
Right.
Maybe when I went to the US, I probably considered the option of staying there, but I think very quickly I became disillusioned about the prospects of setting up my permanent base somewhere abroad. So yeah, I can't imagine finding a permanent base in Australia, not even in the UK.
Right.
Of the countries that I lived in so far, I only liked Finland to the extent that I could consider living there. But still, I would at least want to try to move back to Poland,
Yeah.
see how I like it,
Yeah.
and if you know, if all the benefits outweigh the costs, then I would probably try to stay there.
No, but even then, like, you'd be far from your family, wouldn't you?
No, I would, if I were to move back to Poland, I would be pretty close to my family.
No, I'm saying Finland.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. If I did stay in Finland, yeah, then I would be far. Well, what I'm saying is from the countries that I lived in, this was the only country that I like enough to even consider the option of staying there. But
I know. Mathematically,
it's
that doesn't
not my
imply
first option.
Mathematically, that doesn't imply you would prefer living in Finland over living in Poland, obviously.
Yeah. No, somehow in my vision of life, I want to be certain that I live in a place for the permanent part of residence part of life where I feel culturally comfortable and where I know I have a network of support to rely on. And for
Right.
me, this would pretty much only be Poland at the moment.
Let me just change the scene, I think. Let's try to do it from here.
You're very bright. Don't worry. We all see you clearly.
I couldn't see myself, so I was getting a bit anxious about it. So, Ayla, when it comes to this question of um, like having a permanent job or a permanent base, I can very much relate to what Borys was saying because, like me, he is also in academia, and the distinction between a permanent job and a job that is not permanent is extremely pronounced in academia. The way it is not so much in some non-academic jobs. Like when I tell someone that, oh, good news, I got this postdoc, and they ask me, oh, how long is it for? I said 3 years, and they be like, 3 years, really? I said, yeah, that's a great deal. They go, really? I thought it would be longer. But anyway, so does this question or this consideration of this question of permanent versus non-permanent jobs exist in your field?
So not in my current field, but that played a role in my decision to move out of academia into like normal job, so to say. Yeah.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
I wanted this more stable situation.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I know we recorded another interview where we talked about this. So can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like your decision to your decision to not pursue a PhD and instead go into academia, but from like an industrial angle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I thought about the steps that would come, like doing the PhD, doing postdocs, maybe not maybe, but of course doing postdocs also abroad or doing the PhD abroad. And so knowing that I would only have several years and then I would have to break and have several years somewhere else and everything would only be plannable for a short period of time.
Yeah.
This really stressed me out. So not knowing how this will be on a midterm or long term.
Yeah.
And also not knowing in a context of settling down, having a family at some point.
Yeah.
So this really, even though I so much love doing research, this outweighed it in a negative way. So I couldn't stay there. And that's why I moved to a CRO, so a contract research organization, which is close enough to doing research, but still having the benefit of a permanent position and
a normal
and
life,
also the flexibility that I can move around and still work at the same company. Yeah,
but I mean, so the job that you're at currently, you will be at that job until you die. Is that true?
That's really hard to say. I could, but it's so that's really like calming to know that I could do that.
Yeah.
But it's up to me if I want to do that. Of course, if I find something more interesting, then I can always decide to change my path. But right now I have the safety that I could do this forever, so to say.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation once with this mathematician at University of Copenhagen, and he's like a very strong researcher. Like Borys will realize this once I present the polling fact, like he had like a paper in ACTA, paper in JANS, like he's extremely strong. And I was asking him the following question, like, oh, so if I were to email you, would I still email you at your Copenhagen address? He was like, yeah, why won't you? I was like, like, will you be here in 10 years? He was like, yeah. I said, like, yeah, but if you were to move, like, do you have another email address? He was like, you do realize this is my permanent job, don't you? I was like, yeah, okay. So the thing is, like, I am so used to speaking with people who might not be at the university that they are at now in 5 years' time or in 3 years' time, that I'm always like calculating for this possibility. So, I mean, this question that you brought up, that like Borys also touched on, that when you start a position in academia, like before you get a permanent position, there's always this question or this anxiety of finding the next position. Like even if your postdoc is 5 years long, is going to be for 5 years, or is going to be for 4 years, or 3, or 2, you know that at some point you'll have to put yourself on the job market again, and you'll have to start sending applications to quite a lot of places. So like Boris, this will be a question for you to begin with. Like, do you think that is something that we should, I don't know, relish as people in academia, or is that something that is quite definitely a negative? I mean, calling it a negative might sort of might miss the point, because there is really no other way, is there?
I think this is a negative phenomenon, if that's what you're asking me. Of course, for your professional career, it's good to work to have the experience of working in several different places, because you get to work with different people, you get to learn from different people, you get to see how different places are run, also from a more institutional perspective. So there are always benefits that you do get from doing several different jobs before setting on a permanent position. But in principle, I think it would be good if you had the choice of sticking to one or two places, because the professional part of our lives is not the only part of our lives, right? We also have our private lives. We have our, I don't know, our partners, then we have kids, then we have dogs, cats, whatever. We have our preferences for where we like being and where we don't like being. So this definitely adds a lot to the anxiety that we might feel as early career academics. And it's also not very beneficial, I would say, for the quality of our research, in the sense that, yes, it motivates us to publish more and more, but we waste all this time on sending applications, on writing grant proposals, on worrying about these things, which in principle we could spend more productively on just continuing what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, and
And also, I would say, I would add maybe one more thing, that as academics, it's good if we don't just stick to academia, but if we also somehow cooperate with the external world, right? By, I don't know, there are various ways in which we can do this, but it's much harder to do this if you just move to a certain place for a year where you have no ties with.
That's right.
So in general, I would prefer a system where it's easier to find a permanent position earlier on.
Yeah. And on the, sorry, what?
Sorry, just a short thing. Maybe the periods itself could be a bit longer. So I think 1 year is basically way too short. If you think you have to apply for the next position at least half a year, or let's say half a year before, then there's no time left that you could just focus on what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
So if you have 3 years at minimum, or then longer, then it would at least have some productive time in between.
Yeah, my shortest postdoc was, I believe, 5 months, 6 months, something like that. Like by design, like it wasn't because I was fired after 5 months. Like that was the length that was offered to me. Yeah, didn't you have something similar, Boris? Like in Finland?
Yeah, so my Finnish postdoc was supposed to last for 5 years, then got prolonged to 7.5, but that was because I had the Greek postdoc lined up afterwards. So
5 years?
5 months, sorry, not years. 5 months, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So do you think, like, again, this is a question to both of you, like when it comes to, like, we're moving away from the psychological side, like when it comes to the logistical side, like, do you think there is something very properly or very concretely advantageous to moving so much, or to moving frequently or regularly? Because let's say, I don't know, there is a huge group of scientists or mathematicians who are very, very famous for working on something very niche, and they're based in Australia. And you have, let's say, in your PhD or in various research projects since your PhD, appreciated the work done by these people, and then you get offered like a postdoc or an opportunity to go over to Australia and work with them. Like this can only happen in a world where globalization has taken place, where moving to Australia isn't a no-no for someone who is from someplace far away. Like you can literally be anywhere in the world and be good enough research-wise and land jobs in places that are quite far from where you're physically located at that point. So do you think there is like this, do you think this is a net positive? That is the question I want to ask. Is this a net positive? Like it sounds like it should be a net positive, but I'm not sure if it actually is, because collaboration, of course, happens more organically when you are physically at the same location as your collaborator, in most cases, in my experience. But of course, like with Zoom and with so many online speaking platforms when maybe this isn't so much an advantage anymore. I don't know. Either of you can like add something here. Like, I mean, what do you think? Is it a positive?
I think for the research community, it's definitely a positive aspect. And for the knowledge that is produced, so to say.
Yeah, but the problem there is that like there is no concept of nationality in research in most cases. Like, well, in some fields of nuclear physics maybe, but in most theoretical disciplines in science, there is no concept of nationality per se. So let's say Borys today is working in Crete and he submits a paper to a good journal, and tomorrow, let's say he moved to Chicago. So by the time the paper comes out, he is, let's say, in Chicago, but the paper will record his affiliation as Crete. And so to the third eye, that could imply that, okay, this is like an achievement of Crete because someone who was there did this while they were there. But it's like the person who did it while he was there isn't there the next minute. Like, I mean, they have to keep moving. Like what I'm trying to say is like there was a time, let's say around 100 years ago, or maybe less even, when you could say like this is the Cambridge school of thinking about questions like this, or this is the Australian school of category theory or whatever. I'm not sure. I mean, if there have been similar things in bioinformatics. Like of course my examples are from maths. So I'm saying like with globalization and with the propensity of people to move, or with the willingness of people to move, um, like those characterizations are becoming more and more like anachronistic. Does that make sense?
Maybe it's just more attached to the persons than to
Yeah.
the locations.
Yeah.
So when people move around, then it's more attached to who actually had the
Exactly.
idea, what people were working together
Exactly.
on this idea,
Yeah.
more than on where they were living at the working
Exactly.
at, like,
Yeah.
location.
No, but still, like research journals have to record an affiliation in most cases, in almost all cases. So if I am holding a visiting position in Bonn, and I know I'll be gone next week, but I submit a paper just before moving, I have complete. I have the right to say that Bonn is my affiliation when I'm submitting that paper, basically, technically.
Yeah, but I think
but
these
I
are
know
really minor issues. They don't really matter to us that much. They matter more to, I don't know, granting agencies or governmental agencies that try to judge the quality of the university. And you can make an arbitrary rule here, like at the moment you submit, you record the affiliation of the place that you are in, or you record the affiliation of the place where most of the work happened.
Yeah.
I don't really think this is such a big aspect. But since we're talking about globalization and moving, there is one interesting phenomenon here that I thought a bit for a while. So yes, the definitely the whole globalization process makes it much easier to change universities and countries in your professional career, whether it's academic or not. But especially in academia, there tend to be fewer positions than there are people who want to get these positions. And I feel like this might be a problem for people who come from one of these, let's say, successful countries like the UK, Germany, Netherlands. Everyone wants to go to these countries because they offer good salaries, good working conditions, good regulations. And I wonder, for me, as a Polish person, I always have the option of going back to Poland, which may not offer that good working conditions as, I don't know, the UK, but still it is an option, and it would mean going back to a country where I'm comfortable in. And in fact, I do want to do this. But for instance, I don't know, if you're German and if you're a scientist, it would in principle be harder to get a position. And like if you, I know a lot of friends, especially with Germans, I know a lot of Germans who are good academics, but they simply have not been able to find a position in Germany, and they had to leave their country and go and work somewhere else. Especially a lot of Germans seem to go to the UK for academic positions. No, I'm sure many of them don't mind, but many of them probably do, and many of them would prefer to maybe stick somewhere closer to their homes. So there are also some less obvious disadvantages of globalization in academia, such as this one, that people from the better off countries are in some ways underprivileged in this system.
Yeah.
But can I add something to this?
Yeah, please.
I wouldn't say that this is due to other people coming also to Germany, but more to the way that the German system is made, so that it's not meant to have any permanent or like super few permanent positions only.
Yeah.
That's so it's not a problem of other people coming, and I think that only increases the like the productivity and also the ideas. But yeah, the system itself is not designed to keep people longer than 2 times 6 years. That's by law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
don't
it is
think
accepted wisdom. Sorry?
I mean, I don't think I like this system.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has its.
No, I was going to say that it is a kind of accepted wisdom in the world of like academic research, in the world of, let's say, mathematical research, that getting a permanent position in Germany is super difficult compared to getting a permanent position in the UK or in France or so many other places. Like for a young researcher to land a permanent position in Germany, they have to have, I mean, a couple of very excellent papers in very prestigious journals. That is usually how it is done, but more and more I'm getting to see exceptions these days. But like in general, that used to be a thing, I believe. Um, is that fair to say? I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
also a lot of luck playing into it.
Yeah, I guess. And also like Borys, like since you mentioned like the question of moving back to Poland being an option for someone who is from Poland, like that is a very important factor. Like I see that being a thing with me as well. Like if nothing works, I know, well, maybe I don't know, but it is likely that I will be able to get a position of sorts in India, and then I can stay at that position for a while applying for other better jobs elsewhere if I so want. But for someone who is from the UK, they will not necessarily. I mean, it is extremely unlikely that they will consider moving to India for an academic job, for example. And it's not just about whether, it's not just about, I don't know, colonialism or racism or whatever. Like it is simply a fact of life, and it has got to do with something more intrinsic, I feel. It could be geography, it could be money, it could be like a whole host of things. And this is this is an advantage or a privilege that people from certain countries have over people from certain other countries. And this is tying into what you were saying just now. Do you also think that maybe with globalization and with moving being such a major, let's say, component of modern academic life, it is easier for us to appreciate things that we get in our own systems? For example, I have heard many Polish, well, not maybe many, a few Polish students and a few Spanish students complain about uh, a few things related to their own universities that they find frustrating. It could be travel funding, it could be money related, it could be things related to opportunities and whatnot. But when they, let's say, travel to Argentina and see that they have the same problems there, they feel that there is like a similarity between one underprivileged university and another underprivileged university that do not really have too much in common from the outset. And that is very interesting. Like I used to feel this way about some Indian universities when I was a bachelor student in India. And when I went to the UK for my master's, I could see that there was quite strictly a difference. And as luck would have it, the university where I did my master's sort of went down the drain. Like the maths department there went down the drain, the University of Leicester, I'm talking about here. They had a couple of crises. And now anyone who is associated to that university's maths department uh, is almost equally disadvantaged as I was maybe in 2011. 2012, 2013, that sort of time. So did you get my point? Like this question of like the more you move, the more you get to see or feel other cultures or experience other systems, and the more you realize that there are more things in common than not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say there, you do realize more things that are in common. You also do realize more differences.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
really depends a lot on where you go, where you come from, and how
Yeah.
you tend to view things.
Yeah, yeah. And Ayla, like, do you have to move still? Like, I think I mentioned that you divide your time between Koblenz and Munich. So are those like just trips, or do you have to like move to Munich for a brief period of time and then move back?
Oh no, it's more in the sense of trips.
Yeah, I think moving somewhere for a period of time and then moving back is literally a trip, like like definitionally. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
go on.
but I don't move with like a lot of stuff, just with a few
Right.
bags.
Right. And did you think this question of moving with belongings, like moving with a lot of stuff, is that like a key part of moving? Like I have been trying to cut down on my belongings since my last move, or the move before that one, because I realized that there was a time when I used to have quite a lot of cooking equipment with me. So if I'm moving from some place to some other place and I have to use Ryanair, uh, it's extremely difficult to execute that move successfully without losing things or without yeah. So is this like a life hack that one should learn if they have to move? Don't own too many things, like just
Well, definitely you do learn this, right? That's the more things you have, the more hassle it will cause you. So for instance, for me, I don't have that much cooking equipment. Fortunately, in the last two places that I've been to, the flats that I rented were furnished, and this included also cooking equipment, so I didn't have to buy too much on my own. But in each new place that I move to, I buy a kettle, and I buy a standing lamp so I can read. So there are some things that always have to be bought again and again, because it's not that easy to transport a standing lamp from one place to another, and it might not justify the cost. But I definitely did learn to keep my belongings to the minimum. So most of my clothes are in fact in Poland, and each time I travel home and back, I do consider what clothes I'll need, and I take only these that I need, so that I don't have to.
yeah.
I don't have this problem at the time.
I do remember.
But also for me is the problem is books. So I read a lot, and I often I usually buy books from Poland than from the countries I live in. So usually half of or a third of my little carry-on is filled by books that I do plan to read in the next few weeks. And then on the way to Poland, I carry these books back home. So I don't hold on to a lot of books in the places where I live. I just move them all back to Poland the moment they're read, so that I don't have to worry about them at the time of moving out.
Just on the kettle, though, I do remember your attachment with your kettle, with your Manchester kettle. I'm sure you have a different kettle now, but yeah. And Ayla, like, can you add to this point about belongings, because you have moved a fair bit inside Germany as well. So does that? I mean, I'm sure like the belongings point is equally valid when you're moving within the same country, right? So how do you manage that, like moving?
Well, it's less critical, I think, than in your cases, because I never had to move via plane.
Okay.
So it's always via road. So it's not that strictly limited. But still, I always think about, okay, what do I actually need? What can I maybe reduce or like declutter?
Yeah.
And also, I had to laugh when you said this about the books, because I had a very similar phase during my stay in Munich, during my studies. And I had this super small dorm apartment or like room. And I always took the books to that place, read them, and put them back to my parents. So I had to because there was no room.
Yeah.
But also this also points up to the point how important it is to have a stable and permanent parents' place if you do move a lot, because you have to keep these things somewhere.
Yeah.
If you carry them all over the place with you, then it makes things much more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, An old professor once said to me that back in the day when he had to move to, was it Princeton, like some US East Coast University for a postdoc, he had to send his books by ship. They had to ship them, like literally, like it, like ship them before he took the flight. Like when he flew, he just had a few bags, but most of his books reached wherever he was going before he did. Um, Another, like maybe we can end with this question or this like mini discussion. Like one key part of moving, I feel, is the, well, maybe it's the experience, maybe it's the realization that, I mean, this is going to sound again philosophical and fake simultaneously. Like the realization that, you know, like nothing in life is fixed, although Boris will maybe contradict that by saying, like if you have, like as I said, like if you have a permanent base well defined, not a permanent base, sorry, like if you have a family home somewhere and you have people living there, or you have people taking care of that place, even if they're not living there, you can at least keep books or certain like things there. But I'm saying, like with moving, I often tend to realize, and I often later on like forget the realizations that, you know, like nothing is fixed. Like let's say I have been made an offer to move to a very nice city tomorrow, like I have to move tomorrow or like in a few weeks. I can get excited, but then I realize this too will go away one day. Like, and I don't know where I'll move after this place. And like this realization, like nothing in life is permanent. Although again, some things can be permanent. But do you think that's, I mean, have any of you had that realization, or is this like, yeah, I don't know.
So in a sense, yes, but I also realized that it will stress me out a lot if I always think that way. So I try to think about the moment and where I'm now. And as soon as the, like, let's say the deadline approaches, then I will start thinking about that.
Right.
But
right,
I'm not thinking about it now.
Right.
I agree
Boris?
with both of you in that, of course, in your everyday life, you tend to have more pressing things on your mind than
Yeah.
general reflections like this on the nature of the world.
Yeah.
But I agree with Schröder in principle that the more you move, the more this perspective hits you at some point. And for me, it was particularly striking because I grew up in a village in Poland, having a lot of family around, and somehow there was this idea that, you know, no, in my mind, that no matter where you go or what you do, the reference point is fixed, kind of, and this is the, let's say, the two villages from which my parents came from. And yeah, it was hard to me at some point to accept that this will not always be the case, and that our life is much more liquid or fluid than what it is. I guess it's also part of growing up, right? Even if you don't go far away from your family home, even if you don't go to another continent, you still at some point shift your reference frames, and you have to accept this at some point. But yeah, I agree that you do learn it, and moving definitely makes you learn this faster.
And also, like you and I are both in academia, so like as I've told you maybe a few times before, like there is this canonical postdoc depression that engulfs you and gives you all these realizations for free. Like, oh, by the way, please be pessimistic about this one as well. Please be.
But I think there is a crucial difference between the two of us here, in that, like for me, I have this mind that I at least want to try to go back to Poland and see how I like it. Whereas with you, like you had a short postdoc
I had a
in
postdoc
India
in
at some point,
yeah.
But you don't seem to be one of these people who just want to go back to their home countries.
No. I could work in Singapore.
So you seem to be much more accepting of this fluidity, let's say, of
in a way, yes. Yeah, this used to appeal to me at one point, that, oh, new countries, and yeah, it doesn't so much now. And I love, when you were growing up, were you ever drawn to novels or, I don't know, poems or songs or movies that dealt with moving?
I don't recall something right now, something literature, music wise. It was a topic because my parents split and we had to move.
Right.
So that's how it entered my life.
Yeah. Boris?
I mean, certainly this theme did occur somewhere, but probably less so in books, but more so in real life. So in my extended family, but also among the kind of broader community of people living around me here, a lot of people had the episode of living in the United States at some point, because a lot of people from Poland want desperately to move there from the poor communist Poland. And for instance, from my dad has 3 brothers and 2 sisters, so there are 6 of them. Out of them, 5 of them at some point worked in the United States, you know, doing some simple low-paid jobs, but still they at least tried to, or at least they had this moment in life when they considered that they might move there and look for the future then. Ultimately, of the 5 of them, 3 came back rather quickly, 2 stayed there for longer, but even these 2 are either have moved back to Poland by now or are moving back to, and they actually are moving back to the very specific area of Poland that we come from. So this theme that you're describing was much less associated to me with art, but much more with the real life that I was also seeing around me.
Yeah, and I'll just end with, well, I'll mention one song that both of you should listen to. It neatly deals with this aspect, except maybe one aberration. And the other thing that I wanted to say before it was that as human beings, we often tend to think of ourselves as people who want to do good for the world and the world as a whole, like not just your particular community or your particular city or village or town. And even if that doesn't imply, or even if that didn't imply actually visiting faraway places and, you know, like doing community service there or things of that sort, it can imply at least knowing about places, like knowing about places far away. So of course, in today's world, we can watch films coming from all over the world, like literally all over the world, like not just films with English language. Like on my Netflix account, on my feed, I very often get recommendations of Turkish films, of Polish TV series that no one in Poland has apparently heard of. Like I will maybe give you some of these names later. Like Netflix recommends them to me and I watch them. I feel like, I'm getting like a nice flavor of like a pocket of Polish society. Then I ask someone from Poland, hey, have you seen this? And they're like, what? And they have no idea. So the thing that I'm trying to say is like, when you get the feeling or the realization that you have some kind of a handle on how things are going down in places that are very, very far away from you. Like if sitting in Singapore, you can care about the earthquakes in Syria and Turkey. And similarly, if sitting in Syria and Turkey, you can care about, North Korea and so many other places. It sort of gives you a feeling that you are at least not extremely parochial. You're not at least extremely regional in your outlook as well as your thoughts and your actions. And that, in some cases, can be a very soothing realization or a soothing feeling. It can be a fake feeling, like as I just said, like whatever series I'm watching might not be portraying a very genuine or a very authentic side of the society in which those shows are based. And it just feels nice sometimes. Like someone mentions a random country, and I can like, oh, didn't they have an election there last year or last month? And I feel like I at least know something about that country. In reality, it is quite likely that I actually know nothing. But just this feeling is nice. And if it is compounded by the fact that I have lived there maybe for a few months many years ago, or I've lived near there many years ago, like that gives me, like that, like fills me more with like some kind of positive emotions. Like, can you guys understand what I'm trying to say? Like, it's just this idea that as human beings, we have a way of connecting with or caring about parts of the world that are very, very far from us.
Yeah, but it's also a different type of connection. For instance, relating to the example that you gave, you can be based in Singapore and read about the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, but if you are far away, you can always safely dissociate yourself from these things and you can leave them whenever you want. So you do get some kind of feeling about the places that you read about or hear about or watch about, but I think it's still not nearly the same as actually living in these places. But you get a very, very, let's say, limited experience of these places this way.
Yeah, Ayla?
So I can't really speak about the experience of having been in places myself and then learn something about them later on. It's more about knowing people that come from such places and then like speaking with them about how they feel about what's happening maybe right now.
Yeah, and also sorry, go on.
No, so I, for example, have a friend that is from Syria, and so we recently spoke about the earthquake and how it affects his family parts that are still in Syria, and so that's the closest that I come to such a topic.
Yeah, I was going to mention an example of exactly that flavor. So I know a guy from Turkey. I met him at a conference in Glasgow many years ago. He's now a postdoc in Northeastern, like somewhere in the US. And I've been thinking about writing to him, reaching out to him to ask how his family are doing back home in Turkey. And this realization that every time something awful happens somewhere, you might know someone, well, maybe in some cases with a couple of degrees of separation, who might be affected very directly by it, is a very eerie realization. Like some war begins somewhere and you go like, oh, maybe I can ask my friend how he or she is feeling about it, how he or she is getting affected by it. And of course, like there will be like unscrupulous actors who will be very cathartic about it. Like they will just ask people how things are going just to feel like they were taking part in some kind of a, I don't know, for journalism thing. Like, hey, how is it going? I heard things are bad over there. Hope you get better. Good luck. And that's the end of the text. But instead, when you take an interest in a very organic way, like when the interest comes from a very organic source, I feel like if done right, that can go towards, again, I don't want to sound like the Beatles, like it can go towards like promoting, I don't want to say promoting world peace, but like there I've said it, like the more you have friends from different countries, from different parts of the world, the more likely it is that you will be bigoted in any major way. But I'm sure Boris and I have met people who have traveled the world and are still like bigoted in their very unique ways.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right. So the song that I wanted to mention, I'm of course not going to sing it. I will spare you that agony. It's a song by Simon and Garfunkel. It's called Homeward Bound. Have you heard it? It literally talks about this performing artist who is traveling around, I guess, the US, performing at various cities, and he's making good money. He is like being successful, but he's also yearning to go back home. Yeah, I'm sitting in the railway station, got a ticket to my destination, on a tour of one night stands, my suitcase and my guitar in hand, and every stop is neatly planned for a poet and a one-man band. Then blah blah blah. And there's a bit of music, and then homeward bound. I wish I was homeward bound. Yeah. And there are some things in there that are being assumed that are probably not so canonically true of mathematicians. Like home where my music's playing. Sorry, home where my thoughts escaping. Home where my music's playing. Home where my love lies waiting silently for me. Like, okay, dude. Like, but if it yeah, it's just like a side comment on like this train moving in and of itself has on forming relationships and like getting married and having children. All right. Any last comments? Especially like Boris, you are like the master mover out of us.
Maybe I'll add that I generally respect people who feel much more enthusiastic and optimistic about moving, who are willing to accept this lack of fixed points much easier than I do. I don't know how it feels because I'm on the opposite. But I do wonder sometimes how it must feel when, you know, we are genuinely very excited about going to a new country.
Yeah.
And
Ayla, any final thoughts?
No, but it was very interesting to talking to both of you.
so,
Yeah,
Hearing
yeah.
your views.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about who I could bring, and I thought, okay, of course I have to bring Borys. Like, it's like one day suddenly, like my example of walking across that tree in Manchester and suddenly happening upon a mathematical breakthrough, like a few days ago, I was like, wait a second, I have got this. And then I was like, yeah, Borys, can you come on to talk about this? Yeah. Okay, I'll stop recording.